Thank you very much, Mani grazie, and Stefano Boeri for inviting me here today. I'm afraid I'm speaking in English, so I hope you can understand me. Okay, I know the sound's not amazing, so I'll do my best to speak slowly and clearly. I have an idea about the future of architecture that I've been thinking about for a long time. I'm not sure if it's a positive vision of the future, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's a possible, even likely idea for the future. So I want to show you some work today and give you some background on this idea, but then I want to have a bit of a conversation with you as well. So when you're watching the films that I'm going to show you, listening to me talk, I want you to think about the possibilities of what I'm talking about, also the dangers maybe, but most importantly, I want you to think about how you would feel living in the future that I'm going to show. So first off, I'm going to show a film. It's a short film, just 2 minutes long, and it shows you something about what I'm talking about.
Cup of tea. Fill kettle with 2 hot, place 1 PG tips tea bag in a clean mug. Good. Now get the skim milk from the refrigerator. Carefully pour boiling water into the mug. You're doing great. While you're waiting for the tea to brew, why not browse some recipe suggestions to help you decide on a dish that will satisfy your palate.
速くなった。すごい。
スピードは遅いから速いまでよ。
Can I have a show of hands actually at the moment? Oh, sorry, I skipped too far. Can I have a show of hands? Who here is a student? Okay. Who here is architect? Okay. And then who is nothing to do with architecture? Okay, well done. My background is in architecture, and I started becoming interested in augmented reality 6 years ago when I was studying for my master's. And I was kind of frustrated at that time because there were lots of really interesting conversations which were happening around the internet, around network culture, social media, open source. And as an architecture student, I wanted to engage with those things because I really felt like it was those things that were driving our culture. But I wasn't able to when I'm designing a building. But when I found out about augmented reality, I was very interested in its ability to be able to connect digital media and virtuality into spatial design. This is the first, I think, use of augmented reality during the Gulf War. And I think now, you saw, this is where we are now. And Pokemon Go is a really interesting thing because, you know, obviously you're kind of overlaying the physical world with information from the virtual world, and that's the essence of it. But we still have a lot further to go in augmented reality. We're going towards a future where we will have some kind of smart glasses or contact lenses, and we'll be able to overlay the space with information from the internet or from wherever we want to. So we have this kind of merging of the physical reality with the virtual reality. One of the effects of that is that we're going to free media from screens. At the moment, we can think of media being kind of trapped within these different surfaces on your phone or on your TV. But within augmented reality, we don't need these devices anymore because they can be anywhere, obviously. But augmented reality is part of a bigger paradigm shift that involves other technologies as well. Technologies like smart cities, Internet of Things, wearable devices, and all of these devices together are marking a shift away from the technology as a device and going into technology being everywhere, being part of the environment, being part of the body. And this is a completely different way of thinking about technology. So I think all of these technologies together are going to really change the way that we construct and we consume space. And I think the world can be radically different. And I'm just trying to understand what that looks like. I'm not trying to sell you this technology. I'm actually quite critical of the technology myself. And this project tries to serve as a critique of the way that the world is going according to Silicon Valley or whoever. Next, I want to show you my new film, which I released. The one you just saw now is already 6 years old. This new one I'm showing you now is just a few months old. This one is also short, a little bit longer than the last one, and it has a story, and I hope you can follow, but if not, you can also find it online.
Fantastic. Oh. Great. Nice. Great.
Más tarde. Apúrate si quieres una buena calificación.
Voy lo más rápido que puedo.
¿Has pensado en correr? Es saludable y eficiente.
Seguro que no hay más trabajos disponibles. Yo estudié para ser profesora y estoy haciendo mercados.
Y además puedes quedarte con los puntos de fidelización. Eres una monje afortunada. Tienes que confiar en la aplicación. ¿Te sientes inspirada? Gracias. Chao.
¿Quién soy yo? No, eso no es lo que quiero decir. ¿Para dónde voy? No. Puedo volver a empezar. Olvídalo.
Estoy presente ahora. Me amo. Estoy libre de mi ira. Estoy libre de mi tristeza. El amor es mi entrega.
Adiós. Olá, eu sou Maria.
Bueno. Hola otra vez. Ay, no, cállate. ¿Qué está pasando?
Buen día, Emilio. ¿Qué puedo hacer por usted?
¿Qué está pasando? Mis puntos están bien.
No se preocupe, sus puntos están seguros conmigo. ¿Le puedo ayudar en algo más, Emilio?
Yo no soy Emilio, yo soy Juliana Restrepo.
Por favor, espere.
Hola, Juliana Restrepo. Me alegra verte. ¿Qué puedo hacer por ti?
Mis puntos están bien. ¿Qué está pasando?
Tranquila, todo está bien. Parece que alguien está intentando vulnerar su cuenta. Por favor, espere mientras reinicio su dispositivo. Hola, Juliana. Me alegra verte. Hoy te ves hermosa. ¿Estás estrenando zapatos?
Ya lo arreglaron. Tengo que seguir trabajando.
Estoy trabajando en eso, pero necesito verificar tu información biométrica. Por favor, sigue la línea azul hasta el centro de servicio más cercano para confirmar tu identidad.
Sí, pero mis puntos están bien.
Todo está bien. Chao.
¿Qué? ¿Qué es esto? ¿Qué? ¿Qué está pasando? No, mis puntos. ¿Qué hago? ¿Qué es eso?
Thank you very much. So, who would like to live in this world? Nobody? Really? Who would not like to live in this world? Okay, can we do this question? Like, why not? Over here, maybe. Anybody over here have any reason? No? Okay, over there, can you get the mic over there? Oh.
Wonderful and interesting provocation. As an advertising man, the scary idea, of course, that the mix between identity and reality becomes such a unison. It is a trajectory that we're definitely going towards. So yes, it is not something that I wish for, because there's already enough clutter out there to pollute, in a sense, message and information from noise. So in many respects, your reality is hyper-boosting something that is already out there when you walk into Times Square.
Right, okay, so you find this like a believable future, or even a present, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the scary bit about it.
Yeah. How about is there anybody who's in architecture? Advertising thinks it's believable. How about over here?
Yeah, hi. I actually believe you already live there. For example, if you go to what I found really interesting, I'm from Peru, and in the South American countries, especially in the poor areas, you can see that advertisement just consumes you, like in every sense of the word. You're walking down the street and there is advertisement on the left and the right, and actually, I would say that people of the higher standards, like with a higher quality of living, pay in order to not have advertising at all. And for example, if you go and watch TV that's public television in South America, it's kind of like 5 minutes of like the program itself and then 20 minutes of advertisement. And I actually think like many people actually live in that reality, but they don't know any better. So they don't know if there's like some way to free themselves from it.
That's a really interesting point. And in the first film that I showed you, there was a scene, when she walks into the room and there's advertising everywhere. but she's able to kind of tone down the advertising if she pays. So this is an idea that comes from, the kind of freemium or free-to-play mobile games that, you can download them for free, but it's going to show you some advertising, or you can pay for like the pro version. This could also happen to space as well. Has anybody got any other reason they don't want to? Maybe over there in the blue shirt.
I was wondering also what will happen to architecture. Actually, when the virtual supermarket disappeared, they were art and they were only virtual. So maybe the architect will build virtually, and the real architecture will become neutral to be to disappear behind this virtual world. What do you think about it?
Oh, that's a nice thing to say. That's exactly what I'm going to talk about today. So that's great. You may say that this is not a world that you want to live in, but at least the technology of this is coming. Whether you like it or not, Silicon Valley is investing billions of dollars into creating the technology to make this kind of world possible. And at the moment, we don't really know what it's going to look like, but we know that it's going to come in some kind of form. So as your question, I think it's really interesting to think about what impact that could have on architecture, on the way we construct space and on the way that we consume space. So that's what I want to focus on today. And today I'm going to talk about five new terms that we can use to talk about architecture in the future. The first one is subjective space. So in the first film, you may have noticed this in the kitchen, and these dots that are on the wall, I really put them up there. They're in the physical world, because when I'm filming that thing, I need to be able to track where the camera is at the whole time. And I realized when I'm doing that I'm actually kind of modifying my physical environment. I'm changing it to be able to be read by a machine. So it's not the environment speaking to me anymore, it's the environment speaking to a device which then speaks to me. And you get that happening in other situations as well, a big QR code on a billboard which is not readable by the human eye. And I was just in China last week, and this poor guy has a QR code instead of a name tag. So you can't even know his name, you have to scan this. So I think we're already starting to see a physical environment which is set up, which is optimized for mediation, which expects there to be a kind of layer between me and the environment. There's a technology, there's a device there. I'm going to show you another film, another older film of mine, and I'm just going to talk over it as we talk, because this film is, if the first film that you saw is about the invasion of the media coming inside, this older film is talking about how we can take our private space into the open. So we're looking at this guy who's kind of surrounded by all of his notifications, all his feeds, all of the things that are relevant to him. And we discover that he's in a kind of like a living space, like a domestic space. It's like his office. And around him, he has all the things that are personal to him. They're customized. Things like his books, his favorite books in there. He's customized what his outside looks like. He can customize his wallpaper in a very literal way. But you can do this even in a public space. You don't need to necessarily be in your office in your house. You could be in a cafe like this. And you can see here, I was really interested in the idea of an interface being something that isn't like on a screen like this, but can become a spatial thing. So I was thinking about the cockpit as a kind of good metaphor. Also, I've been kind of trying to imagine how people will represent themselves in space. So this is a character who's, I didn't quite finish this scene actually, but she's kind of selecting what other people are going to see about her. She's kind of making her own virtual avatar within this kind of augmented reality world. But the really interesting thing I want to focus on is the next scene, which is coming up, which is talking about how people perceive a space. Because the augmented city is a bit like the web. You can't see the whole thing at once, right? It's like if you imagine like Twitter, for example, you're not going to see every tweet that there is ever, because it would just be so much. So you have to choose a part of it you see, and you do that by following people. And I think in the augmented city we could have a similar thing, that in a space you could have many, many different layers of different types of city, but you're actually choosing from within that using this device called the channel browser, which allows you to turn on and turn off layers, choose ones that are interesting to you, and don't show ones that are not interesting to you. And by doing that, you create a completely unique view of the city, something which is a reflection of your own personality onto the environment. This final scene I didn't actually finish in the end. I made this when I was a student, so it was, I had a deadline. But the idea here is that these two people will bring their realities together and they would start to merge, and you would be able to have a completely unique reality which is only about these two people. So I'm really interested in how we can kind of aggregate those spaces. And you can see that it's very difficult in this world to be able to define what is a public space and what is a private space. In a way, a public space can be made private by wearing some earphones and going into your own little world, and a private space can become public instantly by broadcasting on a webcam or something like that. So I call this idea subjective space, this idea that you could be in the same environment but experiencing very different realities. So if you look here, these guys are literally in different virtual realities. These guys are a bit more present day, kind of immersed in their phone, all doing different things. And I think this already kind of exists in our world as well. In the US, there's this big kind of coffee shop culture where lots of people who are working on their laptops or whatever, they go into a cafe. I think it's harder to do that in Italy, right, because the coffee is very small. But in America, they have very big coffees like this, and you can spend like a day just drinking one cup. So it means that people are using those cafes for many different functions. Some people are doing their emails, or they're having a meeting with somebody, or they're meeting their friend, or they can be doing shopping, or many different things. So in architecture school, I was taught, and I'm sure you know as well, this famous maxim by Mies van der Rohe, which says form follows function. Right? You heard that before? Form follows function. The idea is that you think about the function of a space, and then you design the form to allow this function to happen. And that's how the form should be made. But we're in a situation now that everybody brings their own function with them. You can hold your function on this device. And in fact, at the moment, we're in a situation where form and function are kind of becoming unstuck. The second term, I don't know what to call it, but I think Chinatown is an interesting one. I'm trying to find examples here where augmented spaces are already existing. And this is Chinatown in London, and I was really interested to see that obviously when the Chinese community moved into this area of London, there was already all of this Georgian architecture on the side, that already existed. But in order to bring some of their cultural heritage, or probably more importantly to attract tourists, they erected this gate and many other little bits of adornment on the area in order to kind of apply a meaning, apply a cultural identity onto a space. And I think this is a kind of augmentation. It's kind of a layer of meaning on top of a physical infrastructure. Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown talked about this in their amazing book from the 70s, Learning from Las Vegas. And on the right is one of the diagrams from that book. And it talks about on the strip in Las Vegas, as you're driving down, you see these signs. And instead of the signs being on the building, part of the building's identity, actually you have a separation. So you can have the sign separately, and then over there somewhere is the building itself. So again, we have a separation of the infrastructure and the sign, the semiotics, the meaning. So I can imagine in the future there will be a split in the architectural profession. On one side, you're going to have people who are dealing with the infrastructure, people who are dealing with the physical, the bricks and mortar, the steel, the concrete, and there'll be planners, there'll be economists, there'll be developers. And on the other side, you have the spatial, the experiential quality, the architects who are building in the augmented layer. And what they're able to do is create kind of experiences, and I think these experiences can become much more interesting than the current possibilities of architecture allow. For example, you don't need to worry about gravity, for example, and you can take on many other possibilities as well, like you'd be able to make interactive pieces, or you'd be able to make pieces that change over time. So is there anybody who thinks that's an interesting idea? Or is it kind of, we think that the old way is better? I mean, I speak to a lot of people who think it's kind of interesting, but it's not going to be better than real architecture, right? But I wanted to show you this. I grew up in a town called Reading in the UK, and it's a pretty ugly town. Like, the buildings are cheap and they're designed by developers, not by architects, for the maximum efficiency. And I think, you know, in this kind of world, and why I was showing the supermarket scene as well, is because most people don't live in beautiful situations and beautiful surroundings. Most people live in kind of crap towns like Reading. And I think that if we can start to enhance these spaces with augmentation, that could be something positive, potentially. So in my mind, Chinatown is representative of this separation between infrastructure and augmentation and meaning. I'm not saying this is a future that I fully support, and I think the films talk a lot about the problems of these worlds, but I've been trying to think about the opportunities. So this is one of the opportunities, this idea of a liquid city. So I was talking about the ability for augmented architecture to be responsive, to be interactive. And also we can have things like events. So at the moment, architecture is pretty static. I mean, this space is actually quite a good example of an architecture that's not static, that can change. But think about the ability to have like a pop-up market on the street, or a pop-up tennis court, for example. Sometimes we see these kind of situations where you have the signage that can change the direction of the road depending on the time of day. And normally this is used to get around rush hour, things like that. But if you put all of the signage into the augmented layer, this can happen instantaneously and on any kind of scale. So imagine you're in a cafe on the street and you want to expand the amount of seating outside during the lunch rush. It's completely possible. Or maybe you want to have an improvised game of football on the street during your lunch break. Or maybe even you could have like an outdoor nightclub on a highway. All of that kind of stuff is totally possible. This is like a little clip of a film. Actually part of the next hyperreality, I think. This character is driving around the city, but they're being guided by this kind of city operating system, which is showing them where to go. It's finding the best route for them. I like the idea that this person could be going on the same commute every day, but maybe every day their route is different depending on what's happening in the city at that time. So I think about the liquid city like that, you know, that you're like a little stone in the liquid city, and you're small, but you still make a ripple. And the city becomes this very fluid organism, which is responding to everything within it, be that a person or a vehicle or a supply chain or an event or whatever. And of course, that's all going to be moved forward by the desire to create new economic opportunities, new markets for things. So currently in the city, you can pay for a parking space to effectively rent a piece of the city, rent a piece of the ground. And like going to buy a coffee in Starbucks and you're kind of paying for a coffee, but you're actually renting that space to use their seat, to use their Wi-Fi for an amount of time. And I think in the near future, automated micropayments are going to make it possible to be able to open that up into a larger market, so that spaces become no longer of a fixed purpose, but they can be rented and available to anybody who needs it and is willing to pay. So eventually, I think we could get something like a cloud infrastructure. So this is how a cloud infrastructure works. You have a server backend, and the idea at the moment is on your home computer, maybe you have extra storage space that you're not using, or maybe you don't have enough storage space. Or there's like processing power that you really need when you're doing a render, but you don't need right now because you're out, right? So in the model of cloud computing, you can put all of that stuff into a server which is not in your house, but is somewhere on the other side of the world, and you just take what you need and when you need it. And it makes a much more efficient system, and it's scalable, and it's on demand. I'm kind of interested, what if that can happen to space as well? That you could have spaces that you could rent out depending on what you wanted to do with it. It's kind of one of the weird ideas. And finally, the idea of the open source city. So now everybody has the ability to be able to be a photographer or be a filmmaker by using these devices. And we've seen what happens there is that we have like a lot of crap right? But we also have a lot of more interest, and we have this kind of big boom of cultural expression. This is an equation that was written by a writer called Charlie Ledbetter in 2010, and it goes more cultural heritage stored in digital form, plus more accessible to more people, plus people better equipped with more tools to add creatively to the collection, equals an exponential growth in mass cultural expression, which he calls cloud culture. So he's talking about this ability of digital video, digital photography, to be able to get people interested to make all of this stuff happen. And you see that happening around Instagram, Snapchat, lots of different things. But I'm really interested in what that could happen to space. So what if people, just normal people, not architects, could start to design spaces and publish them and share them with other people? I think instead of our cities being decided by architects and planners and developers, they could become expressions, spatial expressions of the people who actually live there. I think spatial design is changing a lot. I'm going to wrap up soon, but I think we're starting to see it already. I'm doing some consulting in Silicon Valley, and many of the programmers there are starting to encounter architectural problems. It's like a really rapidly emerging new field of interaction in space using VR. And I look at where the avant-garde of architecture is now, and it's nowhere near that. You know, people are looking in the other direction. And I think maybe we should be starting to think more about the opportunities and challenges that digital technology are giving us, because if we don't do it, then somebody else is going to. So I want to leave time for a bit of discussion, so I'm going to stop there, but thank you very much. Cheers. Does anybody have any other comments or questions? Did you want to say something earlier? Sorry, I cut you off. Sorry.
Well, before I wanted to ask the question that this whole type of research of virtual reality could in fact bring health issues in terms of depression, being solitary, and all of this. But my question right now is basically, what are your thoughts in virtual reality in terms of security for people that do not want to let their information out and all of this?
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a great question, and it addresses something that many people don't think about with augmented reality, that by definition, augmented space is a space that's being tracked and surveyed and recorded the whole time. So if I'm wearing glasses, we're having a conversation, all of that conversation is being read and recorded and analyzed by the machine. And it gets in between our very personal relationships with other people, our private time, in what we think is a private environment. And do we want to let corporation and brands and governments into that space? It's our choice. At the moment, though, it's very difficult, right? Because nobody talks about it. The people who introduce technology to us are the same people who are trying to sell it to us. And generally what you get is two choices. You have a license agreement and you decline or you accept. If you decline, you just can't use it. And so it's kind of, that there's not really much room for debate. So I think what I'm trying to do with this project is trying to make a piece of work that people can talk about, people can discuss, and hopefully it will provoke a debate and raise questions about what kind of future we want. But yeah, it's a really important issue.
No, I think I have two questions. So first of all, I think that you are totally right. We have to run this kind of devices, otherwise they will run us. So I absolutely agree that this is crucial for architecture and for urban planning. That's my opinion. One question is about how much, so it's about the notion of flexibility. So we have worked a lot. You know that one of the most relevant architectural rhetoric is about flexibility. So spaces could host any kind of possible function and so on. So you are introducing a very, very important step. So flexibility is a projection. It's a potentially projection of our desires, or our wishes. And the point is how much this is individual and this could be shared and become public. And I think that you are totally focusing the point. The question is, first, where is this threshold between subjectivity and objectivity, where at which point we can start to think that what we are projecting is part of a common experience. So that's a very, very fragile, delicate, sensitive, complicated point. Very, very important for all of us if we start to enter in your world. The other point is it's very simple. It's about poor and rich people. So isn't in a way the risk is there the risk that in the next future this could become like a kind of gate community world? So only for people who can buy the device that can allow us to have an augmented experience in some common place. So how, and the second question, how could we avoid this? How could we imagine to have a world where everybody could really enter in this sphere? Because you imagine, so we could have a kind of gated community that will be completely and only virtual and only material. So we have like a kind of, no? Okay.
It's amazing. You hit on probably the two biggest issue in the digital world, and these are such big issues that they have names. So the first one is called the filter bubble. Yeah, the filter bubble. And the filter bubble is this idea that when you're searching on Google, that kind of thing, it's changing your search results based on who it thinks you are. So it tries to deliver you relevant information. On Facebook as well, if you click on some links, it's going to try to give you more links like that. So in the end, the internet you see, or the web you see, is not the same as the web that everybody else sees. It's one that's kind of customized to you. Same as if anyone here has Netflix, it's going to be the similar thing, that it's going to recommend you shows based on stuff you'd like. And in the end, it means that everybody sees this different world. So in that way, if we apply that to space, what do we have to unify us? Like, how can we make sure that we're not, I think we already live very different lives in the city, right? Like, I live in a part of East London, and there's lots of different people from different communities.
And you feel the space in a different way from your...
Sure, but we do have architecture. We have this in common. You know, this is the thing that connects us. That's the point. And if we remove that, then really we are in totally different worlds. So I was thinking, what can we do, you know, in this world? What could we bring in? It feels a bit heavy-handed and top-down to say you have to have this layer, like a government layer, you know? But maybe I was thinking you could have something like butterflies. Maybe everybody sees the butterflies, you know? Something like that. But it's a big problem. The other thing you mentioned about the digital divide, that, you know, I'm showing this perspective from, this is shot in Colombia, by the way, in South America. And it's supposed to be, you know, not necessarily the very elite person, but, you know, some like a normal person living in a normal situation. And her reality is going to be very different from the person who is the elite, who can afford to get rid of all the advertising and have a system which is optimized for that person. So you have this growing divide between the rich and the poor, the ones who are digitally enabled and the ones that don't have access to technology. The way that the tech industry is dealing with that is trying to get tech into the hands of the people, of everybody. But often that can become criticized as well. There was a big scandal about Mark Zuckerberg wanting to give free internet in India to everybody, but limited internet, and everything running through Facebook.
Exactly.
So, you know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Super great. Other questions, please? Many?
Yes, okay, excuse me. The first question was exactly the same, about which sort of digital divide could happen with this technology, but it's a very difficult question, I understand. And even if it's rather clear that the devices for obtaining this result will be more and more cheap, of course, as a phone and so on. But the question of different speed of knowledge about reality is an important question, even if any popularization of technology will be able. But you already answered. The second question is that in your videos that I've seen on the web, they're very famous. Of course, you show the result of this experience, but you do not declare the design of the devices which are involved. Of course, this is not your problem, you know, the scenery. But my question is about which, in your vision, which kind of devices or tools do you imagine that could be realized, even in your imagination? And second, it is a little more technical question, which is exactly in your vision the score that you give to stereoscopy in digital immersive vision.
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yes, the first is...
I got the first one, but the second one about stereoscopy?
Which is the importance or the relevance that you give to stereoscopy in digital immersive experience?
Or like two different ones?
Yes.
Well, I assume... Sorry, are you wearing... Can you... What are you wearing? Okay. We have a cyborg. Yeah, so... sorry, yeah, I mean... yeah, that's great. That's great. I think he has the answer.
Part of the question.
Actually, I wanted to add something on the first thing you mentioned about... okay, firstly, what devices is it going to be, right? So you have something on your head at the moment. There are many others in development at the moment. You have Apple's project, you have Magic Leap, you have Facebook's project, you have many different ones. In a way, I feel like there's lots of really smart people working on how it's going to happen, but not that many people thinking about why it's going to happen, like why are we doing this? So I'm trying to kind of ignore that question and just focus on the bits, because I think in some way it's happening. And I think actually maybe it's not augmented reality, maybe it's not mixed reality. But even if it isn't, we're still going to have things like smart cities, Internet of Things. We'll have public displays like, screens on the wall, this kind of thing. And they could be made to work in a very similar way. So in a way, I'm talking not about augmented reality. I'm talking about a larger paradigm shift from where we are now with devices to when technology happens in the environment and on the body. So it's this kind of shift. With regard to your question about stereoscopy, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by it, because I'm assuming that you're talking about projecting different images to different eyes, and this is just part of the hardware. This is something that we can do already with VR, but I guess maybe we're talking about terminology and maybe it's a different question, but thank you. Yeah.
He's a photographer, so he's used to...
Yeah. Okay.
To capture the reality and not to augment it. Last question, maybe. Yes, please.
This guy's already got a microphone, so...
Okay, so I work with augmented reality. I make research into urban environment, and I want to ask you about positive feature about this technology for our future, and maybe they are also utopia. They are not concrete vision, and the weird aspects are more. But I give you two examples, and I would like to know your opinion. Architecture can be completed completely in augmented reality, and there can be less construction and more space for nature and environment on one side, and on the other side, augmented reality can show imagination about architecture and can requalify spaces in a popular dimension of participation. And I would like to know if you think these are concrete direction.
Yes, I think you got it. I'm planning to make 2 more films based in this city in the same day, but from the perspective of different characters. And those characters will be from different backgrounds. The next one is from a higher socioeconomic status, and it's a story about social media. But the third story is about a guy who doesn't have any money, but he has a device, and it's about the open source movement, which I think is maybe the positive way we can go forward here. So this idea that people can start to design their own spaces, people can regain control over their environments, rather than having buildings that say, you can't touch this, or you can't enter, or you can't spray on it, or whatever. You finally have a way to be able to own the space, even if it is in the virtual thing. And what you said about the first thing about, we can put the architecture into the virtual layer, and have more space and, for nature or whatever. It's a great point. And, obviously we're getting more and more pressure, and it's a good thing, to make our buildings more environmentally sustainable, to reduce the carbon footprint. One of the best ways we can do that is by adding lots of insulation, which is not always the most attractive way. But you can imagine a world where we have like a load of kind of heavily insulated blocks, which are then made beautiful in the virtual layer. I don't know if that's a future that would be particularly exciting for architects, but I think there's lots of possibility in there as well. So, is that?
So, thank you so much. I think it was really great. Thank you. Thank you.